but it's like the people that we're there for are the ones who see it and immediately come over and want to share their story, want to say like this card in particular really caught my eye because oh my gosh, everyone says that. It's awful to hear. Like those kinds of things. So those are the conversations that we're really excited for.
Hi there. Welcome to the Connecting KC podcast. I'm Rachel Kilmer, also known as Rach the Realtor on the internet, where I love, well, connecting all things KC. I'm a metro area real estate agent, retired sports reporter, and mom, and probably too old to call myself a TikToker, but honestly, that's how we got here. You can learn more at www.rachtherealtorkc.com. But this show is all about introducing you to all of the movers and shakers, interesting people, heartfelt stories, and funny quirks that make this vibrant community home. So let's get right to it with today's episode of Connecting KC. Welcome into today's episode of Connecting Kansas City, where I am honored to have a very special guest. Madison T. Clark is the founder and CEO of Grief Cards. This Kansas City-based business makes sympathy cards that don't suck. They're created for grieving people by grieving people and are locally and sustainably printed at Skylab Letterpress. When she's not working on grief cards, you can find Madison taking care of projects for her freelance writing clients, attending KC Current games with her mom, or playing kickball with friends. I love that list of hobbies. Madison, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I love cards. I am like one of the like old souls still that is like getting a card in the mail that someone like took the time to pick out for you and wrote a note in is so special still. How did you come to be a card girly yourself?
So I've always been such a fan of like paper products of any sort. Growing up, there was this whole entire cabinet in our kitchen that was just every craft paper item you could possibly hope for, because everywhere we go, I'd want to grab this or that. So big fan of cards. I still have a big drawer of cards, lifelong writer as well. So it's one of those things that I just love getting to send that to people. And then thankfully I have a lot of friends who also love sending cards and receiving them as well. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie 500 Days of Summer?
Yes.
That's like all I can think about. It's like the card writing. I love it. So cards, everyone I think sends birthday cards and all that, but like grief cards specifically are hard because it's like sometimes the language in them is so like weird and awkward and or like overly flowery or like maybe really religious if you're not religious. What got you into the grief space specifically, and what are you trying to do that's different there?
So my brother died when we were in high school. He was a senior at Blue Springs High School, and I was a freshman at the time. And it was a sudden thing. It was a car accident, and I learned very quickly that people do not know what to say when this high school kid who really is just kind of on the cusp of everything, just a few months from graduation, all of a sudden is gone. There's not really cards available, and people also don't know what to put inside of a card if they do actually find a design that's okay. So the big thing for me with grief cards is that there's no toxic positivity. And also, as you mentioned, there's no assumed spirituality at all. So it's like actively avoiding those things. There's plenty of those available in the world. And then it's also with the designs more minimalistic, avoiding flowers and watercolor babbling brooks and those kinds of things. And then I also intentionally make sure that the insides of every card are blank so that you're able to really customize your message, write everything you'd like to write. You have space to share stories and memories. Because I know we received a few over the years because of my brother's loss, and also others from people where the card itself had 5 paragraphs of text on the inside and somebody just kind of signed their name at the bottom. So my thought is always on the side of the recipient, like, hey, how is this person going to feel when they receive the card? And that's very much where all of my intention comes from.
When did you start making the cards, or when did you have this idea? Was it immediately when you were in high school, or?
So yeah, it's been in my head really since then. It was one of those things I just kept kind of hoping that I would see a better option for. And then I had a soccer teammate pass away later in high school. A childhood best friend passed away while I was in undergrad, and my college roommate passed away a few weeks after we graduated. And every single time with these young people, sudden losses, I was like, wow, there's I don't have a card that I would feel comfortable sending to their families or receiving because of my own grief in those situations, just kind of kept compounding. And then I was out of Kansas City area for about 10 years. And once COVID kind of forced me back, I was like, all right, let's kind of take this opportunity, build this tangible physical product and go from there. So card ideas have been rattling around for almost 16 years now. And then finally launched in August of last year, and I've had 2 collections come out so far. So there's 23 cards available as of now, and I'm actively working on the 3rd collection.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
Where, where can people find them currently, and what growth are you working on? Like, where do you want to take this long term?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where I said regularly now, like if Hallmark were to come to me and offer me a blank check for grief cards, I would say thank you, but no thank you. Because it's something that I really want to grow into just an educational resource for people, because I don't think that you have to go through life altering grief before you can be a good community supporter, and really like know how to help your loved ones. So for me, a big part of it is education, and using social media to say, hey, here's kind of some ideas on what you could write inside the cards. Here's some ideas on how these cards can be used outside of just death and loss. There's cards for mental health. There's going to be cards related to pet loss. There's cards for suicide, and for like if your coming out experience didn't go very well. So really expanding into all these ways that we grieve all the time, but there's not that tool available. So the cards are always available at griefcards.co online. So I do have an online shop. And then I'm currently working to really expand like wholesale to be in a lot of different stores, both in the area and more at large. And then I am starting to build some partnerships with organizations like funeral homes, hospice organizations, because those are places that are sending these types of cards all the time. And again, on that recipient end, wanting them to just be able to get something that really speaks to their experience a little more accurately. And it's like everyone has really good intentions, and I just want to give them a better tool to kind of get those good intentions across.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So are you still freelance writing too? And kind of what's your day-to-day like division of your time between grief cards and like more of your day job?
So I am a full-time freelance writer. Obviously grief cards. I also am a college counselor downtown at a high school 2 days a week, which is purely for fun. I used to be a classroom teacher, so just enjoy being back with some students. And then I am also starting my executive MBA at UMKC later this summer. So that's very focused on how can I build grief cards really and create this really strong foundation for something that I just believe in so wholeheartedly. So day to day, it's all over the map. I don't think I have a normal day really ever. So it'll be a mix of client calls, a mix of grief cards related calls, grading papers for my students, planning lessons. So it's really just kind of all over the map. But I've been in education, writing, and entrepreneurship pretty much my entire career, like this 3-pronged adventure. So I'm really just continuing with that because I'm so passionate about all of them. I'm not willing to cut one of them out.
Yeah, you are busy. You have a lot going on.
Just a tiny bit.
So that was actually one of my questions. The MBA is really interesting because I wondered if you already feel like you had a good handle on running a business, being a freelance writer, or if launching grief cards has stretched you on the business side in ways that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I mean, freelance writing, I have my wonderfully cobbled together systems. I was part-time for 5 or 6 years and then shifted to full-time about 3 years ago. And it's one of those things where it's just me and it's just my spreadsheets, and my wonderful CPA when I go see her every spring is like, perfect, these spreadsheets do enough. So knowing that big, like kind of background was helpful. I do still pull from that, but it's definitely been realizing product-based business is a whole other adventure. It being an LLC is a whole other adventure, keeping track of all the details and inventory. And then, of course, I pop up at events around the city. So it's like tracking day-to-day sales online, tracking those sales at events, tracking bulk and wholesale orders. So a lot of those things that I don't have experience in because I don't have any formal business training. But with these, it's almost barely 6 months now that Grief Cards has been launched, and definitely have learned that there's a lot of things I don't know yet. So that's really the big drive with the EMBA, is to say, okay, what can I learn? How can I build a network that's explicitly focused on grief cards and building grief cards? And then just kind of continue happily with my writing and education work in the background.
The growing, like having so many things going on at once, how do you find the creative space to not only be able to write still, but then also write cards and like invest in the art and the creativity behind the cards? Like, what do you, how do you do that? Like, I mean, do you ever hit creative roadblocks? Are there like things that you do that get it going every time? How do you approach that aspect of your work?
Yeah, there's definitely roadblocks sometimes. I have kind of like a running document of card ideas, and those come from people externally saying, hey, just the other day I got an email that said, hey, I really wish you had pet loss cards. And I was like, I promise they're coming in the next collection. I already have a couple like mocked up for my designer to start working on. So there's all these ideas just kind of coming in all the time that way. So I make a point to just keep track of them all in one spot. But even when I am stuck, especially between client work and brief cards writing, it's just all so different in terms of the actual mental capacity that it's asking for. So I do take a lot of walks. I take a lot of naps with my cat, to be perfectly honest. And then I have an entire bookcase that's just full of poetry books. And I find that reading those in particular always kind of helps, like, spur something along, give me a little bit of time away from screens. And then I can come back to my work feeling a bit more creatively prepared for it.
Yeah, that's smart. That's smart. Yeah, actually what I was going to ask you. So it sounds like you have someone else that does the actual artwork for the cards. How did you find that person? How do you get them to share a vision with you on what you're thinking?
Definitely. So at Skylab Letterpress is who prints my cards in North KC. They are incredible. It's a two-person team there, Bob and Michelle. And so I'm a writer from way back. So I go in with the words for sure in place, and then kind of a mock-up that's my best effort at what I would like it to look like. And then I hand that off to Michelle, and she basically turns my really bad Canva mock-up that includes inspo pictures and a couple paragraphs of the vibe I want to go for, all of that. She turns into these amazing actual designs that are then vectored in all the correct, accurate ways for a letterpress. And I basically will come in and sit with her to just go through them one by one and say, oh, let's actually turn the, like within my font, turn this S upside down because it looks better that way for that design. So go through just every tiny little bit of them at that point. So it's really nice where all of the writing is coming from me, all of the kind of inspo and design ideas behind it is coming from me, but then she's an incredible partner to be able to say, okay, this would work better because it's letterpress compared to just like commercial printing. Maybe let's move this over here, or size this up or down. So they're just such a great duo to get to work with and partner with. And I think a lot of this has been possible because of their immense support and belief in the brand as well.
Yeah, that's so awesome. The social media side. So it sounds like that is kind of a passion for you to have that platform to share not only about the cards, but about the message and like trying to help people grieve. Does that come natural to you? Have you always been a social media poster? Or is that something that you really have to like push yourself to put yourself out there to do?
I've very much been open about my own grief, my own mental health over the years because it's something that I found when I heard other people speaking very openly and vulnerably about those things. It really made me feel a bit more seen. So I've always made a point to share that kind of stuff. It's been almost 16 years since my brother passed away, and I still post every single year about him and sharing that because a lot of people don't think of the longevity of grief and that the fact you're missing your person no matter how much time has passed. So that aspect of it definitely comes naturally. I think the marketing side of it comes naturally from my writing clients, but then because it is so mission driven and values driven, I have worked with somebody for some of the kind of messaging behind the company to kind of help me articulate it a little bit better. So almost doing the same job for me that I do for other people, which has been fun. And then with the photos as well, I recently heard from a friend of my brother's from back in high school, and she offered to do a ton of product photos for me because that's something that she's done professionally before. And so I sent off a box of cards and recently got those photos back, and they're just stunning. So it's really very much a team effort, and knowing, hey, the photos I'm taking at my desk in my apartment, not the best pictures. The paper looks kind of funny. You can't see the details. But from her now, with her generosity of time and capacity, they're really getting to get these gorgeous pictures that now I get to just kind of share some stories along with when I'm posting over on primarily Instagram, but also on Facebook and TikTok as well.
Yeah, yeah, super cool. When you are at in-person events, so doing, it sounds like you do booths and stuff for your cards. What kind of weird feedback do you get from people? Because I feel like people are so weird about grief and like don't know how to talk about it, which is obviously like your whole mission here. But I'm sure people are even weird about your mission to make grief not weird. Like what kind of feedback and comments do you get from random people that come up to your table?
Yeah, so vast majority of the time it's me and my mom at our table. She is such a supportive person. Oh my gosh. And she'll come to the events with me. And so it's funny because now we can just know as someone's kind of walking by, you can see on their face if they have experienced that grief and they immediately sort of get it. Or you can see on their face if they're like, weird, like, why is that here? Like, that doesn't really make sense. But it's like the people that we're there for are the ones who see it and immediately come over and want to share their story, want to say, like, this card in particular really caught my eye because, oh my gosh, everyone says that. It's awful to hear. Like, those kinds of things. So, those are the conversations that we're really excited for. I did have somebody at one of my very first events walk by who was like, you have a very sad job, ma'am. And I mean, we're all experiencing it at some point. Like, I'm trying to make it just better for everybody. And it was this older gentleman, and it was one of those things where I've noticed that a lot of older folks in particular, kind of when they're confronted with grief, like in this kind of capacity, are sort of like, whoa, that's a bit odd because their generation is used to it not being something that you talk about publicly. And then meanwhile, I think my generation in particular, they're walking by and they're like, oh heck yeah, I'm gonna come over and tell you about my mental health experiences. I'm gonna come over and tell you about my grief experiences. Like, we're just so much more open in those types of ways. So I think that's kind of different education for different age groups and different kind of grief experience levels, if you will. So it's really interesting, definitely, to sit at an event and get to see that. But the conversations we get to have with people and the space we get to provide for people is just so special. So hearing those stories, I think, makes any of the weird comments more than worth it.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like you have a very like soothing presence. And like I'm sitting here like, and maybe it's just I assume we're about the same age, like the millennial in us, that I'm sitting here like, here's my grief, here's all the trauma I've been through. Like my cards about my trauma, like what do you see like so that's the millennial generation. What do you see with like the younger generations coming up? Are they less weird about grief than previous generations, or is it like they're just their own brand of weird like the rest of us?
I think they're definitely less weird when it comes to grief. I think in a lot of ways because they're growing up hearing stories from all around the world on social media in particular, and also like through the news too. So I think it's something that they're used to hearing more about. But it's definitely then you think, okay, who's like Gen Z, who's raising them, and what influence is that giving them? So I think there's kind of that give and take with any generation. But I've definitely seen that same sort of energy from them of great, like another tool to connect with my community, another opportunity to really like be vulnerable and speak openly. I think those are values that definitely are instilled for sure in their experiences so far.
As your empire continues to grow and you expand this thing, do you see yourself ever going outside of grief and sympathy into other categories of cards, or do you think you'll kind of just stay in this lane forever and make this lane as successful as you can?
Very much want to stick with this lane. I think there's an expansion to be had for the different types of grief that people have that we don't really acknowledge as grief. So, like I mentioned, if somebody comes out to a family or friend and that experience doesn't go well, having a card to be able to say, like, I'm still here for you. I still support you. Like, I'm sorry that that experience didn't go well for you. But that also expands into divorce, people in hospice, palliative care. Like, I have a fill in the blank card that's essentially, I don't know how much more time we have left, but in the time we do have left, I hope that it's filled with blank and blank. So you're really able to customize, and that can be used for someone with in hospice, someone with a terminal illness. But then I've also had people, like parents, just get it and say, I just want to give this to my child, or I just want to give this to my partner or my own parents. So it's really neat to see our intention behind a card and then how someone actually receives it and interprets that. It's really special to get to see the ways that they're applying it. So I think there's more than enough space in just grief in general, outside of direct loss, where we can really expand there and provide more tools in that way. I think if you're wanting a super cute birthday card, there are tons out there and some incredible presses and small businesses making them. And that's going to be their lane. And I think we'll probably be sticking with more of the grief side of things.
I love it. I love it. So cool. Okay, last two questions I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. First is, what is a great dinner or meal that you've had out and about in Kansas City recently?
Okay, one of my favorite kind of go-to just meals in general, at the I don't know, I actually don't know the actual name of it, but the Italian deli in the River Market, they do sub sandwiches that are so incredibly delicious, and they're also massive. And so you get one, you have half now, you have half for lunch the next day. I actually usually end up getting one of their vegetarian ones, which is like mozzarella and some amazing pesto. I don't even know, and tomatoes and basil, and they're just so good. It's one of those things you go in and you're like, oh, I'm grabbing pasta. I'm here on a Sunday, I'm grabbing some wine. But they have the whole deli like bar set up right there. Mm, amazing. So good.
Oh, I have to rush there immediately. I never would have thought about that. Like, okay, that sounds incredible.
They're so good.
I love it. Okay, last question is, where can people find you? Where can people order grief cards? I know you said your website already, but repeat the website and all of the places they can find you on social media as well.
Yeah, so the website is griefcards.co. And then the social media is at Grief Cards on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If people want to reach out at all, there is like a contact form on the website there. Also, DMs are always open for anybody willing to have a conversation. And then yeah, anybody who's like, hey, let's partner. I just want to chat with you. I just want to talk this through. Count me in. I'm getting coffee with people all the time because it's something again we don't talk about that much. So I'm very happy to talk about it at any point in time.
I love that. Love that. Well, Madison, thank you for like what you're doing. It's such a cool mission and has to be very rewarding for you. So I appreciate the energy you're putting out into the world and for taking the time to come on the podcast today. It has been a delight. So everyone go check out griefcards.co and support Madison's work. And we'll see her on the shelf of Target one of these days, I'm sure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.